Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel Mysterious Podcast. I hope you all are well. Today's story is an unsolved mystery, Mary Celeste. Let's see the real truth of this story. You all must have known about the Mary Celeste ship, which sank into the sea and no one claimed to see it in the sea or saw that the world was disappearing. Mary Celeste. Mary Celeste, often erroneously referred to as Marie Celeste, was a Canadian-built, American-registered merchant brigantine that was discovered adrift and deserted in the Atlantic Ocean off the Azores Islands on December 4, 1872. The Canadian brigantine Dei Gratia found her in a disheveled but seaworthy condition under partial sail and with her lifeboat missing. The last entry in her log was dated 10 days earlier. She had left New York City for Genoa on November 7 and was still amply provisioned when found. Her cargo of alcohol was intact, and the captain's and crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. None of those who had been on board were ever seen or heard from again. Mary Celeste was built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia, and launched under British registration as Amazon in 1861. She was transferred to American ownership and registration in 1868, when she acquired her new name. Thereafter she sailed uneventfully until her 1872 voyage. At the salvage hearings in Gibraltar following her recovery, the court's officers considered various possibilities of foul play, including mutiny by Mary Celeste's crew, piracy by the Dei Gratia crew or others, and conspiracy to carry out insurance or salvage fraud. No convincing evidence supported these theories, but unresolved suspicions led to a relatively low salvage award. The inconclusive nature of the hearings fostered continued speculation as to what had happened to the ship's occupants, and the story has repeatedly been complicated by false detail and fantasy. Hypotheses that have been advanced include the effects on the crew of alcohol fumes rising from the cargo, submarine earthquakes, waterspouts, attack by a giant squid, and paranormal intervention. After the Gibraltar hearings, Mary Celeste continued in service under new owners. In 1885, her captain deliberately wrecked her off the coast of Haiti as part of an attempted insurance fraud. The story of her 1872 abandonment has been recounted and dramatized many times in documentaries, novels, plays, and films, and the name of the ship has become a byword for unexplained desertion. In 1884, Arthur Conan Doyle wrote J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a short story based on the mystery, but spelled the vessel's name as Marie Celeste. The story's popularity led to the spelling becoming more common than the original in everyday use. History of Mary Celeste. The ship was constructed of locally felled timber, with 2 masts, and was rigged as a brigantine. She was carvel built, the hull planking flush rather than overlapping. She was launched on May 18, 1861, given the name Amazon, and registered at nearby Parsboro on June 10, 1861. Her registration documents described her as 99.3 feet, 30.3 m, in length, 25.5 feet, 7.8 m, broad, with a depth of 11.7 feet, 3.6 m, tonnage. She was owned by a local consortium of 9 people, headed by Deweys. Among the co-owners was Robert McClellan, the ship's first captain. For her maiden voyage in June 1861, Amazon sailed to 5 islands, Nova Scotia, to take on a cargo of timber for passage across the Atlantic to London. After supervising the ship's loading, Captain McClellan fell ill. His condition worsened. The Amazon returned to Spencer's Island, where McClellan died on June 19. John Nutting Parker took over as captain, and resumed the voyage to London, in the course of which Amazon encountered further misadventures. She collided with fishing equipment in the Narrows off Eastport, Maine, and after leaving London ran into and sank a brig in the English Channel. Parker remained in command for 2 years, during which Amazon worked mainly in the West Indies trade. She crossed the Atlantic to France in November 1861 and in Marseille was the subject of a painting, possibly by Honore de Pellegrin, a well-known maritime artist of the Marseille school. In 1863, Parker was succeeded by William Thompson, who remained in command until 1867. These were quiet years. Amazon's mate later recalled that, "We went to the West Indies, England, and the Mediterranean, what we call the foreign trade. Not a thing unusual happened." In October 1867, at Cape Breton Island, Amazon was driven ashore in a storm, and was so badly damaged that her owners abandoned her as a wreck. On October 15, she was acquired as a derelict by Alexander McBean, of Glace Bay, Nova Scotia. Ownership reassignment and name change. New owner name Benjamin Briggs. Captain Briggs crew. Benjamin Briggs was born in Wareham, Massachusetts, on April 24, 1835, one of 5 sons of Sea Captain Nathan Briggs. All but one of the sons went to sea, 2 becoming captains. Benjamin was an observant Christian who read the Bible regularly and often bore witness to his faith at prayer meetings. In 1862, he married his cousin Sarah Elizabeth Cobb, and enjoyed a Mediterranean honeymoon on board his schooner Forest King. 2 children were born, Arthur in September 1865, and Sophia Matilda in October 1870. By the time of Sophia's birth, Briggs had achieved a high standing within his profession. He considered retiring from the sea to go into business with his seafaring brother Oliver, who had also grown tired of the wandering life. They did not proceed with this project, but each invested his savings in a share of a ship. Oliver invested in Julia Pollock, and Benjamin in Mary Celeste. In October 1872, Benjamin took command of Mary Celeste for her first voyage following her extensive New York refit, which was to take her to Genoa in Italy. He arranged for his wife and infant daughter to accompany him, while his school-aged son was left at home in the care of his grandmother. Briggs chose the crew for this voyage with care. First Mate Albert G. Richardson was married to a niece of Winchester and had sailed under Briggs before. Second Mate Andrew Gilling, aged about 25, was born in New York, and was of Danish extraction. The steward, newly married Edward William Head, was signed on with a personal recommendation from Winchester. The 4 general seamen were Germans from the Frisian Islands, the brothers Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, Arian Martins, and Gottlieb Gaudskal. A later testimonial described them as peaceable and first-class sailors. In a letter to his mother shortly before the voyage, Briggs declared himself eminently satisfied with ship and crew. Sarah Briggs informed her mother that the crew appeared. Abandonment found Mary Celeste in Ocean. On October 20, 1872, Briggs arrived at Pier 50 on the East River in New York City to supervise the loading of the ship's cargo of 1,701 barrels of alcohol. His wife and infant daughter joined him a week later. On Sunday, November 3, Briggs wrote to his mother to say that he intended to leave on Tuesday, adding that our vessel is in beautiful trim and I hope we shall have a fine passage. On the morning of Tuesday, November 5, Mary Celeste left Pier 50 with Briggs, his wife, and daughter, and 7 crew members, and moved into New York Harbor. The weather was uncertain, and Briggs decided to wait for better conditions. He anchored the ship just off Staten Island, where Sarah used the delay to send a final letter to her mother-in-law. "Tell Arthur," she wrote, "I make great dependence on the letters I shall get from him, and will try to remember anything that happens on the voyage which he would be pleased to hear." The weather eased 2 days later, and Mary Celeste left the harbor and entered the Atlantic. While Mary Celeste prepared to sail, the Canadian brigantine Dei Gratia lay nearby in Hoboken, New Jersey, awaiting a cargo of petroleum destined for Genoa via Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse and First Mate Oliver DeVoe were Nova Scotians, both highly experienced and respected seamen. Captains Briggs and Morehouse shared common interests, and some writers think it likely that they knew each other, if only casually. Some accounts assert that they were close friends who dined together on the evening before Mary Celeste's departure, but the evidence for this is limited to a recollection by Morehouse's widow 50 years after the event. Dei Gratia departed for Gibraltar on November 15, following the same general route 8 days after Mary Celeste. Dei Gratia had reached a position of midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal at about 1 p.m. On Wednesday, December 4, 1872, land Tim. Captain Morehouse came on deck, and the helmsman reported a vessel heading unsteadily towards Dei Gratia at a distance of about 6 miles, 9.7 kilometers. The ship's erratic movements and the odd set of her sails led Morehouse to suspect that something was wrong. As the vessel drew close, he could see nobody on deck. And he received no reply to his signals, so he sent DeVoe and second mate John Wright in a ship's boat to investigate. The pair established that this was the Mary Celeste by the name on her stern. They then climbed aboard and found the ship deserted. The sails were partly set and in a poor condition, some missing altogether, and much of the rigging was damaged, with ropes hanging loosely over the sides. The main hatch cover was secure, but the fore and lazarette hatches were open, their covers beside them on the deck. The ship's single lifeboat was a small yawl that had apparently been stowed across the main hatch, but it was missing, while the binnacle housing the ship's compass had shifted from its place and its glass cover was broken. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the hold, a significant but not alarming amount for a ship of this size. A makeshift sounding rod was found abandoned on the deck. They found the ship's daily log in the mate's cabin, and its final entry was dated at 8 a.m. on November 25, 9 days earlier. It recorded Mary Celeste's position then as off Santa Maria Island in the Azores, nearly 400 nautical miles the point where Dei Gratia encountered her. DeVoe saw that the cabin interiors were wet and untidy from water that had entered through doorways and skylights, but were otherwise in reasonable order. He found personal items scattered about Briggs' cabin, including a sheathed sword under the bed. But most of the ship's papers were missing along with the captain's navigational instruments. Galley equipment was neatly stowed away, there was no food prepared or under preparation, but there were ample provisions in the stores. There were no obvious signs of fire or violence, the evidence indicated an orderly departure from the ship by means of the missing lifeboat. DeVoe returned to report these findings to Morehouse, who decided to bring the derelict into Gibraltar 600 nautical miles away. Under maritime law, a salvor could expect a substantial share of the combined value of rescued vessel and cargo, the exact award depending on the degree of danger inherent in the salvaging. Morehouse divided Dei Gratia's crew of 8 between the 2 vessels, sending DeVoe and 2 experienced seamen to Mary Celeste while he and 4 others remained on Dei Gratia. The weather was relatively calm for most of the way to Gibraltar, but each ship was seriously undercrewed and progress was slow. Dei Gratia reached Gibraltar on December 12. Mary Celeste had encountered fog and arrived on the following morning. She was immediately impounded by the Vice Admiralty Court to prepare for salvage hearings. DeVoe wrote to his wife that the ordeal of bringing the ship in was such that I can hardly tell what I am made of, but I do not care so long as I got in safe. I shall be well paid for the Mary Celeste. Explanations. What instant in Mary Celeste? To support Flood's theories of murder and conspiracy, yet suspicion of foul play lingered. Flood, and some newspaper reports, briefly suspected insurance fraud on the part of Winchester on the basis that Mary Celeste had been heavily overinsured. Winchester was able to refute these allegations, and no inquiry was instituted by the insurance companies that had issued the policies. In 1931, an article in the Quarterly Review suggested that Morehouse could have lain in wait for Mary Celeste, then lured Briggs and his crew aboard Dei Gratia and killed them there. Paul Beck argues that this theory ignores the fact that Dei Gratia was the slower ship. She left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste departed and would not have caught Mary Celeste before she reached Gibraltar. Another theory posits that Briggs and Morehouse were partners in a conspiracy to share the salvage proceeds, although no evidence exists of a friendship between the 2 captains. Hicks comments that if Morehouse and Briggs had been planning such a scam, they would not have devised such an attention-drawing mystery. He also asks why Briggs abandoned his son Arthur if he had intended to disappear permanently. Although Riffian pirates were active off the coast of Morocco in the 1870s, Charles Eddy Fay observes that pirates would have looted the ship, but the personal possessions, some of significant value, of the captain and crew were left undisturbed. In 1925, historian John Gilbert Lockhart surmised that Briggs slaughtered all on board and then killed himself in a fit of religious mania. Lockhart later spoke to Briggs's descendants, and he apologized and withdrew this theory in a later edition of his book. Life Saved in Mary Celeste. Arthur N. Putman, a New York insurance appraiser, was a leading investigator in sea mysteries in the early 20th century and wrote a similar lifeboat theory stressing that only a single lifeboat was missing from the vessel. He discovered that the boat's rope was cut, not untied, which indicated that the abandonment of Mary Celeste was performed quickly. The ship's log contained several mentions of ominous rumbling and small explosions from the hold, although cargoes of alcohol naturally emit explosive gas and such sounds are commonly heard. He supposes that there had been a more intense explosion and, in response, a sailor ventured below deck with an open flame or lit cigar that ignited the fumes, causing an explosion violent enough to dislodge the top of the hatch, which had been found in an unusual position. Putman also postulated that in a panicked terror the captain, his family and the crew boarded the lone lifeboat, cut the rope and abandoned Mary Celeste. Similar case. The mystery garnered some attention, but it became famous in 1884, when Arthur Conan Doyle published J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a short story about a survivor of a ghost ship called the Mary Celeste. In his account, a revenge-seeking former slave killed the passengers. While that was purely fiction, many theories were put forward to explain what happened. Most, however, seemed unlikely. There were no signs of violence or missing cargo, casting doubt on claims of mutiny, murder, and piracy. In addition, there was no evidence to support the claim that an explosion caused by alcohol fumes caused the ship to be abandoned. See Peoples on Sea Mary Celeste. Another theory focuses on the ship's cargo, those 1,701 barrels of industrial-strength alcohol. The story goes that some of the barrels may have leaked noxious fumes, a theory supported by the 9 empty barrels found aboard. These fumes may have built up, causing a small explosion, or at least causing the ship's crew and captain to fear an explosion. It is then possible that Briggs ordered a temporary evacuation so that all souls aboard could sail in the lifeboat behind the Mary Celeste while the vapors cleared. At some point, their tow line may have detached, leaving the lifeboat behind while everyone in it watched the Mary Celeste drift away, leaving them alone and helpless in the vast Atlantic. You know, like a nightmare. 11. There was no visible evidence of a cabin fire, though this still leaves open the possibility of alcohol fumes that never commusted. Even a cool-headed, experienced captain might opt for a temporary evacuation in such a case, especially when his own family was aboard. It's a shame that the evacuation was permanent. This theory may have the most going for it. When comparing Solly Flood's notes on the case to oceanography data, researchers found that the Mary Celeste was 120 miles west of where Briggs had thought he was, possibly due to a faulty chronometer, so he had clearly become disoriented. The day before the ship was abandoned, it also changed course, perhaps seeking some relief from rough seas. But bad weather and busted chronometers would not have caused an experienced captain like Briggs to abandon ship. There had to be something else. This is where the pumps come in. On its previous voyage, the Mary Celeste had carried coal in her cargo and had also recently been extensively repaired and renovated. The result may well have been a pump that became clogged with coal and sawdust. This would explain why one of the ship's 2 pumps was found disassembled. Without the pump, and with the cargo hold packed Tetra-style with barrels of industrial-strength alcohol, Briggs wouldn't have been able to tell how much seawater had leaked into the hull. We know from the 3.5 feet of water observed by the boarding crew that there had been some flooding. They had a working pump to use, but Briggs would have been unsure of its extent. At this point, Briggs had been battling storms, was disoriented, and wasn't able to determine if his ship was going to stay afloat. With Santa Maria in sight on the date of the last entry in the log book, Briggs may have ordered the ship abandoned, while he still had the chance to reach land with the lifeboat. 12. As for what happened to the Mary Celeste after that, who knows? Plenty can happen in 6 miles of open ocean while in a lifeboat. Here's a lot to the story of the Mary Celeste that we'll never know. Too much time has passed, too many records lost, and everyone involved is totally dead by now, unless the Dei Gratia had any young giant tortoises in their cargo hold at the time. And yet the story persists, not unlike our collective fascination and curiosity surrounding stories about the Bermuda Triangle, or missing jetliners. Death may be final, but the idea of vanishing from time and space captures the imagination. Just as the vast unknown of the open ocean does, it's a place where things like that can happen. It inspires both fear and curiosity, as well as creativity, if you're Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. As for the Mary Celeste, her end was far less mysterious. In November of 1884, she was sailed right into a reef just off the coast of Haiti, wrecked by a crooked captain who was trying to scam his insurance company. He was charged with fraud and died soon after. Let's see, friends, we bluff but sometimes, and someone solve this mystery. Hope so. Guys, please WHTCH movies available Netflix and Prime Videos. Thank you for the watching. We are start new podcasting. Friends, how did you like the story? I liked it. Please like it and share or subscribe the channel. Stay tuned to our channel to hear more such stories. Thank you very much for listening to